Bet you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. And now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am your host, Rich Barris. That's our good friend, Don. Remember Don? He's doing well. Glad to report. Yeah, look, there's a lot to get through today, so I don't want to miss anything. So let's dive right into it. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do all that. We're going to go through this as quick as we can. I decided what am I going to start out with? MLK and comments about MLK, or are we going to start out with McCarthy? And I think we're going to start out with McCarthy because we're going to be able from there, from another story to roll into MLK, which I think it's important. If I forget, I think it's important to mention right now that Martin Luther King was not popular during his life. Gallup had a different way to measure favorability back then. They used to give people a scale, 1 through 5, 1 through 4. And he had a net negative that was pretty awful. It was only until in modern times that he was spoke of differently. Academia had a huge role in this, of course, which then pumped out journalists, which then in turn became other parts of that cartel of information, right? So they changed Martin Luther King's image. The FBI had a very big hand in crafting Martin Luther King's negative image to the public. All right. So, Katie got her Field of Greens order in the back. I'm so glad you're liking it. What flavor did you get, Katie? I'm curious what you guys all like. I'd love to hear what your favorites are, but I'll tell you right now, my skin, my hair, I'll get into it later, but Katie, give it a couple weeks, a month. Oh my God. I was going to wear a suit today, actually, because I felt so good. And Barry, nice. That's my, Laura likes Barry. I was going to do it, but I did something I almost never do, which is cut myself shaving. And I did it really bad. So you can't really see, thank goodness. But on my neck, there's like a huge gash. And I was going to get blood all over my shirt. So I didn't do it. It wouldn't stop bleeding before I had to do something. So I had to throw this on. But yeah, I mean, Katie felt so good from it. I'm like, you know what? I want to be in a 3-piece a lot now. All right. Let's get into this. I think it's fair to explain both sides of this story and then try, of course, there's always at least 2, if not 3 sides of a story. There's one side, the other side, and often the truth, which lies somewhere in the middle. Maybe one is more right than another. So maybe it's not right in the middle. Maybe it's here. Or if this sounds right, it's like here, but it's not 100%. Kevin McCarthy had tweeted, all right, make very long story short, he stripped 3 people of committee assignments, or had planned to, which they went nuts over, and he's going to do. All right. Eric Swalwell, which we're going to talk about mostly today. I'm back. My kid ran in. Laura wasn't looking, and I don't have kids on camera. I'm not doing that. There's some sick people out there. Anyway, let's get back to it. Eric Swalwell, who's going to be the context of the conversation largely. Adam Schiff, who was the Democrat who took over for Devin Nunes when Democrats took control of the House of Representatives in 2018 on the Intelligence Committee. Big pusher of the Russia collusion narrative. And then 3 is Ilhan Omar, which we'll talk about a little. We're going to talk about all 3 of them a little bit, but largely Swalwell, because this is the conversation that's going on right now. Let's listen to McCarthy first. Forget about what he tweeted. Let's play the clip, and then we'll come back and we'll get the reaction from Swalwell on the left.
If you got the briefing I got from the FBI, you wouldn't have Swalwell on any committee. And you're going to tell me other Democrats couldn't fill that slot? He cannot get a security clearance in the private sector. So would you like to give him a government clearance? You asked me questions about Santos. You asked the questions about Swalwell. Not only was he getting a clearance, he was inside an intel committee. He had more information than the majority of all the members. Did you ever raise that issue? No, but you should have. You're going to tell me there's 200 other Democrats that couldn't fill that slot, but they kept him on it? The only way that they even knew it came forward is when they went to nominate him to the Intel Committee. And then the FBI came and told the leadership then, he's got a problem. And they kept him on. That jeopardized all of us.
All right. So who he's talking about is before, because they're asking him about a Republican from New York who they're putting on committee assignments. The media is having a canary over. As far as I read on this, look, the guy made 2 large misrepresentations, but they're saying like, oh, it's repeated. He, you could argue that he was saying he was Jewish when he was not, and that he had a financial background. He worked on Wall Street or whatever. I even gave him the benefit of the doubt because we had offices that were like in Seeger, I think, or I don't even know, somewhere on the Jersey Shore where I had gone and worked. But just because that firm, which was a Wall Street firm, I didn't always go, doesn't mean it still wasn't working in financials, wasn't working on Wall Street. We did IPOs, and it's obviously was still working on Wall Street, even if I was at that firm doing an IPO at that location. So I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt here, but it doesn't look like at all he ever worked for Smith Barney or whoever he said he worked for. So look, these are misrepresentations. That being said, Joe Biden, what a lot of Republicans immediately say is it's a double standard. Joe Biden, was lied about his college. He plagiarized. I mean, look, folks, he ran for president twice before, and both times was deemed unqualified or unfit to be president. He's all Democrats had to run in 2020 as a figurehead. So Barack Obama put him in there, even though 2 generations of Americans had previously dubbed him unfit, of low character to be president. Standards change. So, that's how Joe Biden became the president. That among other things, I'm not going to get into it. But, the bottom line is Republicans immediately knee-jerk reaction say, well, what about this one who lied about this? What about... So McCarthy is saying here, look, what about Eric Swalwell, who has had major problems and security concerns, yet Democrats kept him on? And let's talk about what that is, because amazingly, the media, the entertainment industry, The View, right? They're all pretending like they don't know what the hell Kevin McCarthy's talking about. And of course, we're talking about Fang Fang. All right, Kevin McCarthy is talking about Eric Swalwell's alleged affair with a Chinese spy, which everybody knows about. Apparently wasn't even that much of a secret. All right, so that's the one side of it. You can't trust a guy who sleeps with Chinese spies. All right. And then the other side is what the San Francisco Chronicle ran to Swalwell's defense, their local boy, of course, and went and got, it's incredible that they're actually referring to this as an agent who was willing to go on the record. That's not true. And I mean, CNN, everyone from CNN, MSNBC are trying to say, no, the FBI has said on the record there was no wrongdoing. That's not true. All right, here is what it really is, the report, okay? Swalwell was completely cooperative and under no suspicion of wrongdoing, an FBI official familiar with the investigation said, speaking to the Chronicle anonymously, as the agent was not authorized to speak to the media. It was a defensive briefing. Information was obtained where we do a duty to warn members. And that's what happened. The FBI became aware of his relationship, which I don't think anybody really would dispute. We have to say alleged affair, but I don't think anybody would dispute this. The deal is he had an affair with a Chinese spy, folks. I mean, that's rap, okay? And the FBI went to him, and he broke it off, supposedly, when the FBI finally came to him. Here's the problem with their defense. First, well, there's two problems. Number one is we've seen FBI agents familiar with the case lie their asses off and do it anonymously to the media, whether it was printed in the San Francisco Chronicle, a lesser known paper, a more local paper, or something more national like the Washington Post or the Gray Lady herself, the New York Times. These people are full of crap. These are the people who said, that the Russia stuff was real. It was not, which, by the way, Eric Swalwell is yet to go back on, along with Adam Schiff, who also got thrown off the committee. He's yet to go back on Tucker and apologize to the viewers for when Trump was first elected, and he still wasn't afraid to go on Tucker. And he said, if I'm wrong about collusion, I will come back on the show and I will admit it. He never did because he's a liar. They both are liars. There was no Russia collusion. It is a hoax. It is a fabrication of people like that. Anonymous FBI agents familiar with the case. Anonymous intel officials. These are the same people who put their names to a letter saying that the laptop from hell was Russian misinformation or disinformation when they knew it was not. In fact, New York Post just reported the other day, one of them isn't sorry at all for lying to you. Would do it all over again. Knew from the start they were lying to you. So this defense that the FBI was willing to go on record, it's not true. And even if it was, here's the problem. How do we know that Eric Swalwell didn't know she was a spy before the FBI went to him, blew the whistle, and then he had no choice but to cut his baggage and pretend like he didn't know and there was no affiliation? And from this point on, we're cut off, the ties are cut. That's number two. Number three, it doesn't matter. You had an affair with a Chinese spy. That's how the Chinese get dirt on you. They go after your family. They go after your personal life. This is how they do business. And now they got you by your California short and curlies. Kevin McCarthy is absolutely right to have concerns about having that man anywhere near an intelligence committee. At the very least, he has displayed a gross error in judgment. Adam Schiff, they never want to talk about. We can bring up the pushing of the Russia collusion hoax, which should be disqualifying in and of itself. Fabricating transcripts live and as a chairman of an impeachment hearing, fabricating the content of a conversation between the former president and Vladimir Zelensky. Fabricating out of whole cloth. If that wasn't disqualifying enough, maybe his associations with less than reputable arms dealers from Ukraine should absolutely have him removed from the Intelligence Committee. I mean, this is crazy. It's crazy Democrats ever kept these people in a position to begin with, which brings me to the next one, Ilhan Omar. Why would Democrats keep it? Well, if there was something seriously wrong, wouldn't Nancy Pelosi have removed them from the committees? No. When Rashida Tlaib was trying to defend her friend Ilhan Omar, who has also been now thrown off committee, when she was trying to defend her friend, she brought up a bunch of people to Capitol Hill to bully Nancy Pelosi. It worked. And Nancy Pelosi, who had been allowing it was really a what do they call it? Excuse me for farting out on you here, but I mean, it's a resolution censuring someone or denouncing someone. And Ilhan Omar had made numerous anti-Semitic statements using the anti-Semitic dog whistle. I hate that term because it's a dog whistle. You either know something is what it is or you don't. But with these examples, the 9/11 remarks, the Jews run the world kind of remarks, those are very clearly, she was displaying an anti-Jew sentiment. And Pelosi, who has enjoyed the backing of secular rich Jews in the country for years, decided to do something about it And she was bullied by Rashida Tlaib's last-ditch effort to bring all of these people to the Hill to pressure them to abandon this resolution, which they in fact did. Listen to who, all right? Because if you're wondering why Nancy Pelosi would keep Swalwell all around, and actually, before we even do that, 1 second, because let's put it into context. Let's listen to CNN, and you'll understand what I'm talking about and why we have to address this.
What do you make of it? I mean, I understand like criticizing somebody, but saying I got a classified briefing from the FBI about so-and-so, and if you knew what I knew, you would agree with what I'm doing. I'm not saying if that's not true. Maybe it is. I have no idea, but I've just not seen such a thing before.
And the shield that he has is the word classified.
Right.
He can say, I can't tell you what I know, but trust me, it's bad. The question is whether there are other Republicans or, frankly, Democrats who might have access to that same classified information who could corroborate not the information, because we don't know the facts and the content, but just the notion that something really, really bad, so bad.
But I think Pelosi was given the same briefing, and she was fine with Swalwell being on the committee.
Look, Eric Swalwell has been, to your point, one of the most rabidly partisan, proudly so, Democrats. And he also has been somebody on the Intelligence Committee. And this is no question payback from Republicans. And remember, this is all part of McCarthy. You mentioned that Marjorie Taylor Greene is on a key committee and others as well. It's also part of him trying to assuage that wing to say, look, I'm getting them back for what they did to you because they took you off these committees.
And not just getting them back. I mean, Swalwell has become an actual focus of a lot of right-wing attention. So the act of punishing him is the objective here for McCarthy, because that's one of the agenda items that the far right has. I mean,
got to give credit to Newsbusters there because that was their clip. But okay, first they get into this like they're pretending they don't know what everyone's talking about. It's these lies of omission that are so dishonest. Jake Tapper, if you remember, is the first, he's supposed to be a mainstream, almost flagship CNN anchor, one of the most credible people that CNN has left at a very discredited organization. All right. And here he is. He was the one who, by the way, as I said, he moved the Russia collusion hoax from the left-wing blogosphere into mainstream media by wink, wink, we can't, we've all seen it, but in case you haven't seen the Daily Beast or whoever it did, right? It was the Daily Beast or BuzzFeed, excuse me. It was BuzzFeed. Let's get it right. Publishing the dossier, all right, which was completely unverified, not credible, and nobody's ever verified anything in that junk. In fact, most of it has been outwardly discredited. All right, so here they are pretending like, first and foremost, Jake Tapper, Mr. Credible at CNN, pretending like he doesn't know what everyone's talking about, and all his panelists doing the same, right? Following suit. Everybody knows what McCarthy is talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Nancy Pelosi knows what McCarthy's talking about. And then before we get on to why Nancy Pelosi has exhibited this behavior before, and all leadership, the media as well, the bottom line here too is Eric Swalwell is not a figure now that has been targeted by the right. Eric Swalwell, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, is a politician who has abused his office and his position, making claims about a sitting president that were not true. You want to talk about election denying. Eric Swalwell and Adam Schiff, along with their new leader, Hakeem Jeffries, immediately after 2016, went about the business of dubbing Donald Trump an illegitimate president who colluded with Vladimir Putin to steal the 2016 election. No YouTube videos like that, making asinine, unsupported claims like that are banned. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't make them any more true. Those allegations were still false. And Eric Swalwell, along with Adam Schiff, played a huge role in doing that. So I don't know why they're portraying him as some target of the right wing. You're supposed to be a journalist. He's supposed to be a target of you at this point as well. He's not a credible person. He's a proven liar, about something so gravely serious that a man felt the need to pick up firearms and shoot his fellow colleagues over it. Because people like Eric Swalwell, people like Adam Schiff, people like those pundits at CNN and others convinced this nutcase that sitting congressmen and women in the House of Representatives and in the Senate were enabling the traitor in the White House. Keep that thought because we're going to come back to it in another segment here. But Nancy Pelosi, why would she do this? If she knew this information and knew the three things we just discussed, even if it was true that he killed the relationship beforehand, how do we know that he didn't know before the FBI alerted to, and he basically cut his losses? Number two, does it even matter? Does it even matter? He's already shown himself to put himself in a position where he could be blackmailed. Number three, again, even more so, does it matter? His judgment, at the very least, has proven to be extremely poor. Anyone who's elected for public office, anyone who joins any of these bureaucracies, you know you're going to be a target of some, I'm being careful with my words here, a Chinese asset. You know they're going to do this to you. You don't do your due diligence? I mean, come on, folks. This is kind of a movie. You can't make this stuff up. Your team doesn't vet the woman in the bar before you take her up to the hotel room, Eric? Are you an idiot? I mean, there are only two options here. You're an idiot or a traitor. I mean, there's what other option is there? Somebody please illuminate me. Now, Nancy Pelosi has a habit of doing this. Let's go back and rewind to when Rashida Tlaib made all of these comments, okay? We did this article on People's Pundit Daily at the time, all right? There was a Wall Street Journal, which we're going to get into, a Wall Street Journal reporter who couldn't believe nobody else was doing this, who she was among the, along with us, really the only ones who were like, who are these people that have been called to Capitol Hill to bully Nancy Pelosi into dropping this resolution condemning Ilhan Omar for anti-Semitism? This is unbelievable. These people were literally supporters of Hamas. Let's get into this. Here's one of them. And I mean, there's images galore. You're going to read them all. Like shame on Wajahat and Rabia and all the other, let's go back to that. All the other Muslim and Arab sympathizers of Israel. F you and your normalization. When Israel kills, you are complicit. Razan's blood is on your hands. Enjoy your Ramadan, bastards. Let's free the people from your pro-Zionist rhetoric. If people can't understand by now that Hamas was created mid-'80s as a resistance to Israel, then they are the only ones fighting for, let's go back. Come on with the auto. They are the only ones fighting for Palestinians from within Palestine. Screw the PA. Then all you need to do to just F off. And then you all need to just F off. You should burn in hell along with Israel. That's Team Emirates, UAE. These are already people, along with the Palestinian Authority, viewed to have, here's another one. You both deserve it. Your work on Israel is abhorrent. The fact that you can't separate Zionism from Judaism is laughable. To be anti-Israel is not anti-Semitic. Let's go back to that. Being pro-Israel is actually more Christian than Jewish. Supporting Israel has no space in the Muslim world. Supporting Israel has no space in the Muslim world. All of these people she's criticizing are already viewed by many moderates to be people who already have dubious ties to extremists and potentially even, outward activists. The Palestinian Authority is sort of the political wing of Hamas. I mean, it's not like these people don't have the same goals. They just have a different philosophy on how to getting, what is jihad? How do you define it? Is it violent or is it political? They all have the same goal. And yet that's not enough for one of these advocates of Ilhan Omar who met with Rashida Tlaib to put the pressure on Nancy Pelosi. House Democrats struggled this week. And by the way, let's go back. You remember this date. This is March 8th, 2019. House Democrats struggled this week to bring a resolution, quote, rejecting anti-Semitism, unquote, to the floor, a measure responding to controversial remarks by Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, about Israel. Representative Omar and Rashida Tlaib, a Democrat of Michigan, became the first Muslim women sworn into Congress in January. That was just over 60 days ago. And to date, both have made or posted comments critics have called anti-Semitic. Only 3 weeks ago, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat California, and her top lieutenants publicly condemned Representative Omar's previous remarks as anti-Semitic. Let me just tell you right now, everyone but Steny Hoyer in that term top lieutenants have been defeated. Engel, gone. By the left wing that nobody told you about between really 18 had the start of it, but in 2020 and 2022, the primaries and the generals that followed them saw the defeat of Nancy. That's why she's not the leader anymore. Of Nancy Pelosi's what's thought to be more moderate members of the Democratic caucus. People like Richard Engel and others who were not anti-Semitic, did not hate Israel, and have been supported by Israeli lobbyists and others for years, had been known to have a good relationship with Israel. You saw people like Bob Menendez, years ago, break with these people because he just couldn't get down with this. Most of those people are gone. And while we were talking about Trump's election-denying insurgency in the Republican primaries, this happened right underneath their nose. At a press conference on Thursday, Speaker Pelosi caved to pressure from the growing dissent among the left-wing base, claiming Representative Omar wasn't, quote, intentionally anti-Semitic, unquote, and didn't understand the, quote, full weight, unquote, or meaning of her words. Folks, that is a load of horse dung. She revealed she had not asked Representative Omar to apologize, nor would she. The watered-down version of the resolution, which even a Jewish Republican member voted against, didn't mention her specifically. The freshman lawmaker will not be relieved of her assignment on the powerful House Foreign Affairs Committee. That is the committee that McCarthy is removing her from now. As requested by 11 Jewish groups in a letter sent to Speaker Pelosi and Representative Eliot Engel, Democrat in New York, who chairs the committee, defeated. I think I said Richard Engel, by the way. Sorry about that. It's Eliot Engel. Defeated by a left-wing AOCite, Omarite, Rashidaite. What happened? What changed? And Speaker Pelosi and her top lieutenants characterized her remarks as, quote, anti-Semitic tropes and prejudicial accusations, unquote, that were, quote, deeply offensive, unquote. To make a very long story short, Rashida Tlaib, all right, and Pelosi walked out of a meeting that was in full revolt. Rashida Tlaib prior had held a meeting with activists who either have ties to or have voiced support for Hamas and other extreme Islamic supremacist groups. Linda Sarsour and representatives of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, also attended the meeting. While CARE bills itself and portrays itself as a Muslim civil rights and advocacy group, it was founded by two members of the Muslim Brotherhood, the now defunct Palestine Committee. This is known information. You're just not allowed to talk about it. The Palestine Committee was created by the Brotherhood to advance Hamas's political and financial agenda in the United States. Nihad Awad, who was also present for the meeting in Tlaib's office, is one of those former committee members, and he currently serves as the executive director for CARE. According to federal investigators, he was a close associate of Hamas leader, I'm going to butcher this, Musa Abu Marzouk. All right? Azra Namani, an author and a journalist for the Wall Street Journal at the time, also considered herself a Muslim reformer, walked into the halls of Congress to be present for the meeting. She was belittled, physically blocked, and taunted by several representatives of CARE. Oh, the video's still on Twitter. I'm actually shocked at this. And I mean, we could watch it.
Okay, wait. Can you do the shot of just walking in with the sign?
Is everybody here? وكان عشان هم في أماكن أول الناس سامعين؟ سألوك فيها يعني مش خليهاش من اول الناس اليوم.
That's Nazid. Nazad.
So if you can just turn your camera off. Okay, his is on. Okay, so his is turning off. Okay, I'll turn it off as soon as you can. I think I should let some other. I know what you're doing, and I don't appreciate it. And I heard you talking. Okay, good. I'm glad you. Excuse me. Why are you blocking the door? Go ahead, guys. You're like blocking the door. Okay, here.
We just need some of the support.
Keep an eye on that guy. You see that brutish guy right there? Keep an eye on him. All right. We're going to talk about him more in a second.
Supporters to actually be able to give
blocking the doors.
There you go.
Right here. Go ahead. There,
Robert.
Okay. So we know what you saw what happened there. Could you imagine if reporters from Breitbart or Fox News or anybody like put their hands on a liberal Muslim journalist? Just let's play the imagine if game for a second. What do you think would happen? All right. Yeah, I mean, it's as a Muslim woman who has witnessed and experienced abuse by Muslim men, is terrifying to be spoken to with the hate, hostility, and aggression Arab Islamic men openly throw at reform women. Shireen Kudosi said, she's from the Clarion Projects. As Nomani points out, this is America, not, and I'm not going to get into it. You guys can read it. But the way we're treated, you can't tell the difference. That guy, Mangi Dawadi, right, who can be seen in the that's the one physically attempting to hold her back and intimidate Nomani. I mean, that's what he's doing, right? He served as the executive director for CARE in Connecticut. The group has removed that information from the staff section of their website. They did that after the reporting. They removed that he was the executive director. It happened like right in front of us. Dawadi supported Tunisia's pro-Islamic and I'm going to kill it, but I'm sorry. Ennahda party, which according to the Brookings Institute, not exactly a right-wing source of information, they are themselves funded by questionable people and are without a doubt a left-wing think tank posing as a nonpartisan think tank. They say that that party has a, quote, gray record on their commitment to pluralism and respect for women's and minorities' rights. On September 24th, just recently when this article was printed, it was prior year, but just in the fall of the year last. It was the spring when we wrote this article. Tunisian President Benji Essebsi ended a 4-year alliance between his secular party and the Islamic Party. I mean, this is unbelievable. And this is who, so, you know, when we're talking about this, it's important to understand that absolutely Nancy Pelosi would cave to this, to elements of her party that she felt like she had to. She knew Engel and others were in trouble and was trying to appease this left-wing base that had been rising, which is far more radical than even the generation of the so-called revolutionaries who came in when she was a freshman back in the 70s. The product of the, you know, free love movement. That is radical compared to them, this new party. But this is what represents the base of the Democratic Party. It's just a reality. If it wasn't a reality, then Mrs. Bush would not have been elected. Then Engel would not have been defeated. All right, so it is the sad but very real situation that the Democratic Party was in, and Pelosi was trying to juggle it, and she would cave all the time. Now imagine if you have this Russia collusion fever over the country, and one of your top pushers of the collusion delusion is now known to have had an affair with a Chinese spy. Are you going to dump him at the risk of pissing off Rachel Maddow's viewers and voters? Are you going to dump Adam Schiff because he, fabricated testimony? Minor offense. Not worth losing the voters over. So if you think for a second she wouldn't have overlooked Eric Swalwell's indiscretions, at the very least poor judgment, then you're living in a fantasy world. All right. So while it is true that the the FBI apparently, and look, it doesn't matter if it's the San Francisco Chronicle or Fox News. No one's really being named on the record here. But Christine Fang, which is the joke, but it is true, Christine Fang. This report surfaced first in 2020. I believe it was in Axios. She was part of an expansive Chinese spying operation that targeted politicians to gain proximity to political power and helped him fundraise during his 2014 run for Congress. He owes them. It doesn't matter if he knew or not. That's the point. It's actually all the better for them that he didn't know, rather than him just being an open traitor. Because now they got him. That's how the Chinese government operates. So government operates, which we're going to talk about more too in another segment. All right. So what's the truth here? Yeah. So the FBI didn't say we didn't catch. What they're saying is we didn't catch Eric Swalwell handing off a top secret thumb drive to Fang Fang. But that doesn't mean he's not a security risk. McCarthy goes on to state and make the claim, which is true, that in the private sector, he would not be able to get a security clearance. How many of you in the audience have held a security clearance? I have. No chance. No chance. You slept with a Chinese spy? Nope. No. You better lie about smoking weed when you're young. And if they catch it, you better hope they take it as something called youthful indiscretion. Sleeping with a Chinese spy? You're not getting a clearance to go work at MITRE Corporation. This is crazy. Of course not. So while Swalwell's technically right that the FBI didn't, or at least that we know of, didn't say he broke any laws, but not to say he didn't, there was no wrongdoing. That's not accurate. You slept with a Chinese spy and took money from them to be elected to Congress. You did something wrong. Come on. Whether he knew about it is irrelevant. I mean, look, and 80s Aaron, right? His entire career is a Chinese sham. He is a Chinese agent. It could be. Absolutely. That's like worst case scenario. Or for him and his intellect, it's best case scenario. But, best case scenario is he's just an idiot who didn't do his due diligence. And we're going to get, I saw what Laura pasted in from, actually, she didn't write who it was from, but that's a good poll suggestion. And if we have time, we are going to go over poll suggestions. We did some on locals about the new culture wars, and there were some really good ones. We're going to run the national poll really soon. We have some funding left over from the Public Polling Project, people who funded projects that were done already, even though they were not fully funded technically. But it doesn't matter. I'm basically just calling it full. I basically just called it already and said, you know what, that's funded. That project's over. So anything that was funded for that will be put toward the new one. So I'll do it before we hit that goal. But yeah, remind me to share the link so we can get going on it. I do absolutely want to get this going. All right, but before we do, let's take a real quick break. Word from our sponsors. When we come back, we've got a lot more to talk about. Bottom line is, Kevin McCarthy's 90% right. And you got to give it to him, folks. You got to give credit where credit's due. Kevin McCarthy ain't taking no crap. Not yet, he ain't. He hasn't started like Paul Ryan. All right, he's a politician. Give him time. The difference between him and Paul Ryan is he's not ideological in really any sense. So right now, it may just be the quid pro quo has not changed yet. And maybe one thing that those people in that interview with CNN, the panelists, were right about. That Kevin is absolutely trying to appease isn't the word. Make happy. Keep the loyalty and support of people like MTG and others? Yeah. Damn right he is. Because these people put their careers on the line for him. They will go nuts. And this is a no-brainer. This is a no-brainer. This isn't some like crazy out of the, I mean, 20 years ago, folks, Eric Swalwell would not even be allowed to serve in Congress, let alone serve on the House Intelligence Committee. 20 years ago, both Republicans and Democrats would have immediately demanded his resignation. Not to say any of them were any better. But you got caught, bro. You got caught. And Axios got the story and ran with it. Sorry. Got to cut you loose. Charlie Wilson was a man whore. Doesn't matter. If he did sleep with some spy and put himself in a compromising situation, he didn't get caught. That was even earlier than that. Earlier than 20 years ago. It was even decades before. This is not something that's crazy and should be a left versus right thing. That man put everybody at risk. He's privy to some of the worst secrets we have. And by the way, folks, he's supposed to be on an oversight committee. Before we get, and I'm going to go into the reads here in a second. The House and the Senate intelligence committees are not supposed to be bosom buddies with the CIA and the FBI and everybody else. They're supposed to be conducting oversight. And when the NSA has it on good authority that you slept with a Chinese spy, you are not going to be able to rein them in. They got you. You screwed up. You're compromised. You're their man now. That's it. You either resign or you are a hack forever. Those committees are supposed to be working for you, folks. You. They're supposed to be protecting you against the overreach, which we're going to talk about more when we get to MLK. They're supposed to be protecting you from abuses of power by incredibly powerful entities. And when they're in bed with them, it kind of makes the whole entire point moot. The system breaks down. It don't work anymore. You're not represented. They tell you lies and half of you believe it wholeheartedly. Trump colluded with Putin. You want it to be true. So for you, it's true. The laptop from hell is disinformation. And then they laugh at you behind not even behind your back. Hell! They'll laugh at you behind your back for a little bit. Then they know that illusory truth effect is so powerful, you're too stubborn to admit you were duped. So they just laugh at you to your face. Then you become part of the joke. And you think that like they're your allies or something. It's an incredible phenomenon. The trust of the security state by the left at some point in the future is going to make an incredible case study on public opinion. And by the way, as it did with the right during the era of the Patriot Act, which the left opposed. And now another member of Congress from the Democratic Party basically wants to implement it at its worst form. Re-implement it. Even though she herself was against the Patriot Act 20 years ago. All right, let's get to this. All right. All that just being said, you trust these people to manage the economy and the supply chain? I don't. Protect yourself against food shortages, folks, whether it's drought, it's inflation, or even new government policies or weather. They're pushing America's food supply near its breaking point. And that's why survival food is more important than ever. Do what Laura and I have done for our family. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits. It's not ordinary food. We're talking good for 25 years, super survival food, hand-packed right in a family-owned facility in the USA. The kits are compact, they're sturdy, they're water-resistant, and they stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners. You can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. Go to 4patriots.com/TPP. That's 4patriots, the number 4, patriots.com/TPP. The link's in the description to get your 3-month survival kit. You'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus 10 free gifts and free shipping. They're called For Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Again, the link's in the description, but it's for the number 4, patriots.com/TPP to build your own stockpile like Laura and I have done for our family. Do it today. If you're on their website, this, by the way, is the best deal, I think, personally. But if you're on their website, checking out their other great products, which I know many of you have done, and they have many of them. Don't forget to use the promo code TPP10, TPP for The People's Pundit, TPP10 to get a 10% off site-wide discount on all other products. All right. While we're on the issue of the economy. And by the way, thanks to all of you who do this, have gone, whether it was Christmas presents or you just, because we saw a lot of them, or you just doing it, because you know a good deal when you see it and you understand how to prepare for the worst. We just want to thank you for it because you got to thank the sponsors for sponsoring the show. You got to thank you for supporting the sponsors. Without this entire arrangement, it doesn't keep going, right? Or it did, for years, but it's going to help us get bigger, reach more, right? So always a word of thanks for you guys, really, truly. By the way, let me pop this up with this here. I got one of your emails. All right. You threw down some coin, pun intended. You threw down some coin, but you got your free when you beat them to it. And congratulations on that. Barbara, I believe it was. You got to call pretty quick. You do. You got to get them pretty quick. But the bottom line is they really, now I wasn't kidding. They really are seriously giving you a premium for going to their website, filling that out, getting there before they get to you, sending that call to you. They are absolutely sending a premium depending on what you spend. Ours was like 6%, right? When we were talking about this. If you do more than that, you'll get more, I imagine. But I'll tell you right now, love GOLDCO. I've known this company for years. Few, if any, that I love as much as GOLDCO. Look, a 200 and plus something little skimp 225. What was it last month for a holiday season? I'm not thrilled about the economic news, nor am I thrilled about the decrease to inflation to the mid 6s. That's still incredibly high inflation, and we're not out of the woods yet, judging by what I'm hearing from people in the industry about gas prices. We're in January. The summer will be upon us within no time. It's the summer driving season. It'll make gas prices worse. So we know this story. The last time the economy looked like this, the stock market lost half its value. U.S. dollar, 46%. The price of oil quadrupled. And yet, while all of this happened, the economy collapsed. Inflation ran through the roof. The price of gold went up 1,300%. Silver, which I love even more right now, 2,400%. I also love platinum. So if history repeats itself, we absolutely could see this happen again. Can you afford to miss what could be the biggest gold and silver boom of our generation? That's why I want you to go to tpplikesgold.com. That's tpplikesgold.com, because when you do, you'll not only get the chance to protect your retirement savings with gold and silver, you could get $10,000 or more in free silver just for doing it. It's a rare opportunity. Don't miss out on it. Protect your retirement savings today. Visit tpplikesgold.com. That's tpplikesgold.com. And I'm super glad you got your coin. And I'm also super glad about the comments I'm seeing from others. Sally, you're among the first ones. Who else we got here? I saw some other ones. Or Katie, and that was another one. I told you. It's not like these other things that we have most definitely seen in the past. Laura and I have tried everything, and I did not want to be the next beat salesman. Okay, I just didn't want. Something's got to work. I'm 41 now. I may not look like it, but I am. I'm 41 now, and that's because you can't see the gray. I use this like Mitchell stuff that hides the gray. But seriously, your metabolism slows down as a man. Women, you experience your own issues. Laura and I have tried it all. There's no way but to pack in an enormous amount of fruit and vegetables a day. these fad diets don't work. All right. And it's not practical. Even for people like Laura and I, who cook as much as we do. We love to cook. I don't know about you guys out there, but we love food, but we also love to just patently, we just love to cook. You know, we always did. I'm Italian and Greek. She's Italian and Puerto Rican. You know, so we're a family of people, you know, who have long traditions of cooking. And with that, you know, as you get older, you got to deal with the realities of getting older, which is that slower metabolism happens, right? And you can try all of this stuff that just simply doesn't do it. You know, the bottom line is what science will tell you is that you need to increase fruit and vegetable intake. And it is not an easy thing to do. It's not feasible. With Field of Greens, from Brickhouse Nutrition, you absolutely can do that. Again, you know, I'm going to go into all this stuff. I like the lemon lime one. Laura likes the berry one, which it looks like most of you guys, you're telling me most of the ones that I see tried it already. You like the berries as well. Even the non-flavored ones, if you guys drink like, I always want to call it Under Armour. It's body armor. You throw a little scoop in there, shake it up, slam it down. Everyone's experience is different. I was immediate, but give it a couple of days, give it weeks, and you will absolutely notice a difference. But you'll look and feel better. You'll look and feel healthier fast. But the greater proof really comes at your next checkout when your doctor says, wow, you've lost weight. What have you been doing? Keep it up. Whatever it is, just keep it up. We can get you started with 15% off your first order. Visit Field of Greens, plural, fieldofgreens.com. Link also in the description. Use the promo code TPP. It's fieldofgreens.com, promo code TPP. You want to lose those leftover pandemic pounds? Maybe leftover from the holidays, but you're sick of all the ads for weight loss pills and fad diets that don't work. We've been there. We've done that. They don't work. You know what does? Eating 5 healthy servings of fruit and vegetables a day. Do that, and the weight would probably fall off. But vegetables, like I've said, maybe you're not a fan of them, or you just simply don't have time. It's not feasible to prepare that. That's Field of Greens for you. Again, go to fieldofgreens.com, promo code TPP. Fieldofgreens.com, promo code TPP, and you will get 15% off today. Get started on it. Get going. All right. Let's see. So we covered the McCarthy thing, and that's getting to, you know, that in and of itself is going to lead into some of these other discussions. One I want to come back to from last week because, man, somebody said something that just popped the argument we were talking about last week. But before we do that, we'll leave that for the end. We'll leave that as a I told you so segment. Should we have an I told you so end of the show segment, like every segment? Because I feel like we could do that. I feel like there's no lack of content for a segment like that. All right. We talked about the JFK thing, and we're just talking about how governments, the oversight committees that the Swalwells and Schiffs are on, these committees are supposed to protect you from them. They're incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous. Just revelation from Tucker last month over JFK. And then as we're moving into MLK Day, see his nephew go on Tucker and make this explosive allegation. But it leads into another greater conversation. And let's start with, I'm going to play the whole, it's like 1 minute and 7 seconds. I'm going to play the whole thing. We'll come back and we'll talk about it and why I'm even showing this.
And to acknowledge that it is Martin Luther King Day, and nothing should detract from his radical vision, Tucker. And he was assassinated by the U.S. government. You've talked about JFK's assassination recently. Yep. This was in the same period. And he was assassinated right when he was escalating from talking about racial bigotry to class and in the war in Vietnam.
I noticed.
And my cousin picked up that mantle and proudly, and I'm a very proud member of the Scott family. So I was rather upset to see that statue, to be honest with you.
Well, you make a good point that no one ever says out loud, but he had shifted to populist economics. I have no idea who killed Martin Luther King, but it's very obvious it was not James Earl Ray acting alone. He had 2 foreign passports. He was escaped from prison. The whole thing is ridiculous. Why is there no interest in that question?
Well, I think that it's a big moment, and there's a lot of pressure when you spend $10 million on something.
It is a big moment. It was a big moment. And then the country was already reeling from all of these other, events that caused civil unrest. Look, I don't know who killed Martin Luther King either. But anyone who's looked at this issue, James Earl Ray, give me a break. It's like Lee Harvey Oswald. It really is. It's a joke. And then it was followed by Mediaite and others, saying, Tucker claims, the CIA killed Martin Luther King with no evidence. It is interesting to me. Well, first of all, there was no evidence James Earl Ray killed. I mean, it's ridiculous. Ridiculous. But I don't want to do a segment on who killed MLK, like I said. It is funny to me, however, that Martin Luther King, a Republican, it's true. And by the way, that's Coretta Scott's cousin. Sorry, I think I misspoke before. But pivoted to populist economics, specifically around the Black community, and also their sacrifice in a war, and I'm trying to be careful here, prosecuted by a government who mistreated them. All right? So at this time period, you have him at odds with Lyndon Johnson and at odds with the director of the FBI, Hoover, who hated his guts. In fact, he was set to this guy was, again, oversight of these oversight committees, so important, it's not funny. I mean, the FBI was running amok back then. Can you imagine what they're doing now when we have hack politicians who are in bed with them instead of actually trying to conduct oversight? These people, in order to keep him from receiving an award and a Nobel, they sent a tape of him having an extramarital affair to his wife. Now, again, during his lifetime, MLK was not popular. He wasn't. He was seen as a troublemaker by America. The majority of him, vast majority of Americans, he was not popular. And I'm not here to defend him, with his, he did some stuff that certainly put his character in question. There's no doubt. But what he was doing, his overall movement, you cannot argue at all that it was a danger to the federal government. He was a danger to the federal government. And Hoover knew that. It was a danger to the order. And he took drastic steps to try to keep this man down, to embarrass him, to discredit him. And it didn't work. Or at least it wasn't working with the people who he was appealing to. And then the minute he starts to have something in common with another very dangerous element of society to the FBI and the government at the time, which is the anti-war movement that happens to be white, somebody puts a bullet in his head. Again, I always get look at the responses on Twitter to that video from the other day. And by the way, there was a poll by Rasmussen. More people than ever are saying that it's not where you would want to see it, I guess, but more people than ever in the history of Rasmussen tracking has said that the U.S. has achieved Martin Luther King's dream. All right, so that's a good sign, at least, right? I mean, it's heading in the right direction. And by the way, it was doing very well under Trump. And I wondered when I saw those numbers whether or not that was the economic benefits that the Trump administration was having on non-whites. Right? Because actually, for all the talk, it was non-white working class that did much better under Trump than white working class. That's just true. I mean, that's Bureau of Labor Statistics data for you. All right. So, again, why am I doing this? Look at the responses, and you will see people shocked at this allegation as if they don't know the true nature of government, because they don't. They very clearly don't. I mean, it's the same people who clap like SEALs for Eric Swalwell, being in league with the intel committees instead of conducting oversight over them, pushing their lies instead of challenging their lies and holding them accountable for their lies. Same thing, ditto Adam Schiff, These people are legitimately shocked that somebody may suspect the government was responsible for the assassination of Martin Luther King. I think it's somehow okay to suspect them of assassinating JFK. Why? Because he was a white man? I don't understand the difference in the opinion. I just don't understand. They both represented something which was a danger to the intelligence communities and the order, the established order. If you don't think JFK was, you don't know your history. JFK did not like the CIA. He thought they were a problem. They had too much power. He wanted to share intelligence that the CIA with other powers that the CIA thought was like U.S. patent approved or something. No way. Whereas JFK thought it would be for the greater good. JFK, his best and brightest administration, that's what they were called, the best and the brightest, did not believe in asymmetrical response. They believed in symmetrical response, which arguably only leads to escalation. But at the very least, he was trying not to escalate all at once in the Golden Triangle. They wanted to escalate. There's just too much money out there. Between the war and the heroin, way too much money. The U.S. Army allowed Frank Lucas to put heroin in the coffins of dead soldiers, folks. Like, this is the nature of government. You stick enough money in their hands and they'll do it. They'll desecrate the bodies of our dead boys who died in Nam for money. And yet these people act as if government is not the number one cause of death in the 20th century. It's a term you've heard a lot on this show. Democide. Look at the numbers. Read R.J. Rummel, Death by Government. Nothing killed nothing claimed more human souls in the 20th century more than government. Specifically Marxist government. But government in general is dangerous. Yet there are those out there that just act so surprised and are willing to give it more and more power. Which brings us to our next segment, which is just astonishing to me. We're going to play the clip first. Actually, we're going to play the video here. We're going to go to the video. We're going to play the clip first. Then we're going to read some of the, if I can get this to work, we're going to read some of the proposed bills text, which should pretty much terrify all of you. Well, it doesn't matter what your race and creed are. All right. So bear with me here, folks. Bear with me. It's a little bit annoying sometimes, but here we go. All right, so I just pulled this from C-SPAN. All right, hat tip C-SPAN, hat tip C-SPAN. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to play it. All right, let's make it big so you can see it. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, cut.
What we're speaking about is, of course, the words white nationalism and white supremacy. For it is clear that the FBI makes a direct point between dehumanizing and derogatory comments which come from white nationalists and white supremacists to the idea that it generates, as you have heard here on the floor of the House, it generates the death of Dr. Martin.
Sorry for interrupting. It's a pet peeve of mine. Idea is not spelled with an R at the end. All right. And I know that may be some cultural thing or geographical, actually. Maybe it's the South, West. I don't know. It's not the South. I've lived in many southern states, so it's not necessarily the South. It's Sheila Jackson Lee, of course, is a Democratic representative from Texas, the 18th district in Texas. But I have a pet peeve of people adding R's, even in Chinese. Sure, idea. It's idea. Idea. Oh God.
Martin Luther King. It generates Charlottesville. It generates Charleston, South Carolina. It generates hateful acts that result in death. This is the kind of intolerance or the tolerating this that we cannot suffer, and the intolerance that we cannot suffer. Because the idea of white nationalism as superior to others and white supremacy indicates that somebody else might die. This resolution is an important resolution to affirm this Congress and this nation that we believe that we all are created equal, as Dr. King said, that we shall overcome, and someday we shall overcome. I yield.
All right, so she yields. And again, Sheila Jackson Lee, Democratic representative from Texas's 18th congressional district. All right. Okay. You can listen to it and you can say, well, of course. Isn't it obvious? We don't want people to commit acts of white supremacy. It's a no-brainer. But what is she really proposing here? And she's been slammed. We're going to read some of the text because she's been slammed by, critics on the supposed right, like Tucker. I would not call him textbook right wing, and people on the left, like law professor and constitutional law expert Jonathan Turley, which he basically said what she's calling for is the end of the First Amendment. All right, so what is she actually saying here? What would constitute a crime if we look at the bill that she has dubbed, all right, and here it is here, Leading Against White Supremacy Act of 2023. I actually am going to read some of these. I'm going to read really from here to here. So you can forget about what the enforcement is. Let's talk about what constitutes a conspiracy to commit white supremacy. All right. So HR 61, to prevent and prosecute white supremacy inspired hate crime and conspiracy to commit white supremacy inspired hate crime, and to amend Title 18, which many of you I'm sure are familiar on and probably do not support, United States Code to expand the scope of hate crimes. The concept of a hate crime in and of itself, or hate crime legislation, has always been controversial for the simple fact that critics would argue two things. One, we already have laws against hate crimes. For instance, let's say if you murder someone based on race, we have a law for that. It's called murder. Proponents will argue, well, we have to acknowledge the motive behind that murder because somehow that murder is worse than any other. Critics would say that's crazy. Whether your motive is racism, hatred based on the race of the victim, or based on jealousy to social status, based on trying to fulfill one of Maslow's basic hierarchy of needs, whatever your motive is to murder someone, you murdered them. When we start to classify some as worse than others, we really begin to soil the memory of other victims. Women, what if a man murdered you simply because you were unwilling to sleep with them? So they were angry and they lashed out and they murdered you because they wanted you and you didn't want to give yourself to them. Do you think murdering someone based on race is worse than that? What about if a sister murdered another sister out of jealousy because she couldn't conceive a child when her sister could? Right? What if a nurse at a hospital in New Jersey was murdering people by putting insulin in non-diabetic patients' saline bags because he was angry at hospital administrative people in general for something that happened to him when he was young? His mother was very ill. The hospital didn't help him fast enough, didn't help her fast enough, and she died, leaving him all alone in this world. So he decided to grow up and become a nurse and use that position to be a serial killer, to get back at all those hospitals, even though the innocent victim is simply somebody who came to the hospital in need of care. Is it worse to kill somebody based on their race than that? So you can see, and what have been the arguments in the past for this? When George W. Bush was the governor of Texas, he vetoed hate crime legislation. Or he killed it. And the NAACP ran an ad, the daughter of the victim, who was basically horrifically tied to a truck and drugged behind a truck. So they get his little daughter to cut an ad. My dad was killed like this. So when George W. Bush vetoed hate crime legislation in Texas, it felt like my dad was being drugged behind the truck all over again. Is that an intellectually honest argument to anything, a counter argument to anything that any of the examples that I just brought up? That's problem one with this bill. Problem two, what constitutes, folks, legally constitutes conspiracy to commit white supremacy? Hate, all right? Let's just skip a little bit forward here. Section 1, short title, this act may be cited as the Leading Against White Supremacy Act of 2023. Section 2, white supremacy-inspired hate crime. A, in general. Oh my God. In general. Anything that starts out with in general should scare the Jesus out of you if they're talking about the parameters to accuse you, charge you, and commit you of some kind of a crime. Okay. We don't want to talk about general here. We would very much like specific definitions of what it is that constitutes a hate crime. But in general, a person engages in a white supremacy-inspired hate crime when white supremacy ideology has motivated the planning, development, preparation, or perpetration of acts that constituted a crime or were undertaken in furtherance of activity that, if effectuated, would have constituted a crime. Well, then Lori Bush would be in some real deep trouble when it comes to what she said about Byron Donalds, a conservative MAGA representative from Florida. Would it be used like that? Section 2B, conspiracy. A conspiracy to engage in white supremacy-inspired hate crime shall be determined to exist, 1, between two or more persons engaged in the planning, development, preparation, or perpetration of a white supremacy-inspired hate crime. Or, does that sound familiar? Because all they did was repeat that other line. Or, 2, between two or more persons. 2A, at least one of whom engaged in the planning, development, preparation, or perpetration of a white supremacy-inspired hate crime. You noticing a pattern here? And 2B, at least one of whom published material advancing white supremacy, white supremacist ideology, antagonism based on, quote, you ready? Replacement theory, unquote. Or hate speech that vilifies or is otherwise directed against any non-white person or group and such published material. Before we get into 2B1, that's yours truly. We've talked about replacement theory in great detail in an intellectual capacity here. If something may have happened as a result of it because some nut job. By the way, Ted Kennedy, numerous Democrats have been writing about and speaking about replacement theory for decades. This is not some term that right-wing ideologues plugged out of the ether, pulled out of the ether, plucked out of the ether, and decided to use with some ill intent because they're racists. This is a stated goal of the Democratic Party and has been for decades, to change the racial composition of the electorate because they cannot trust white people to vote the right way. Even Democrats. This began to take root in the Democratic Party, even though Ted Kennedy had advocated it for years over it. It began to take root in the Democratic Party in the 80s when Reagan thumped Carter and Mondale, because they lost over 1/5 of their own party to the Republican nominee. And then it began to dawn on some of them that Reagan really didn't do much better with black voters. He didn't do that much better with Hispanic voters. It was those white Democrats who were unloyal to us, who were disloyal to us. I mean, not that I care to advance her work here or anything, but she has been exhausted, inciting decades and decades of instances, both written and verbal, of Democrats talking about replacement theory. And her name is Ann Coulter, which I'm not, some huge fan of. But she has done the legwork. Others have done it as well, but she's been on it for a long time. She's written books about it. She did not fabricate these quotes. These are very real quotes in so-called mainstream publications, in books, on the floor of Congress, at campaign events. Tucker Carlson could be arrested and charged with a crime if this were to become law, based on Section 2B. Section 2B2B. Moving on. B1, Roman numeral 1. Was published on a social media platform or by other means of publication with the likelihood that it would have been viewed by persons who are predisposed to engaging in any action or furtherance of white supremacy hate crime, or who are susceptible to being encouraged to engage in actions in furtherance of a white supremacy inspired hate crime. Donald Trump. Right there. She even cited the Charlottesville hoax, even though that's a hoax. Donald Trump never called white supremacists very fine people. But folks, in that clip that I played, we all know who she's talking about. Congressman King himself could arguably be charged under this law if it was to become law. How many Democrats would get charged? None. Because the violence they inspire are usually against either non-whites who are conservatives, which in fact could get them charged, but they would never be charged with it because it would be violence against conservatives. They wouldn't give a damn. Or they would be charged because the violence they inspire are directed towards whites. Or at least statistically. It's statistically likely that violence taken out on Republicans and MAGA and conservatives would be perpetrated by left-wingers like the gentleman we were just talking about who believed Sheila Jackson Lee and her colleagues that the former president was a Russian traitor. So he got a gun and decided to mow down the traitor enablers. He would not be charged under this law because he shot white people. I think perhaps one of the security guards may have been black. One of Steve Scalise's security detail may have been black. But again, that wouldn't even matter. Because let's be honest, would they ever use this law against their own? Of course not. B2, Roman numeral 2. Could, as determined by a reasonable person. Who's a reasonable person? This woman just cited a fake hoax, a fake conspiracy to commit a hate crime, white supremacist hate crime, i.e. Donald Trump and the lie the media told that he called white supremacists in Charlottesville very fine people. Next to Russia collusion, and actually one could argue that the Charlottesville hoax is even more dangerous to society than the Russia hoax. One could make that argument. I think I've heard Scott Adams make that argument before. And honestly, it's a persuasive argument. Why? It has more staying power. Accusing the president falsely of being a traitor is pretty dangerous. But this has staying power. And it pits generations of races against each other. It takes generations to undo. And it was a lie. Because, of course, Donald Trump never said, no matter how many Netflix shows you see on it, no matter how many Vice documentaries they run, they're lying. But to who's a reasonable person? To Merrick Garland, to Christopher Wray, to Sheila Jackson Lee, to Hakeem Jeffries, who will be the one who goes to the microphone to call for it. These are all people who push these lies. You're not going to be able to reason with them at all. This will be used as an authoritarian tool to prosecute, using again a very dangerous government to prosecute their political opponents. Could, as determined by a reasonable person, motivate actions by a person predisposed to engaging in a white supremacy-inspired hate crime, or by a person who is susceptible to being encouraged to engage in actions relating to a white supremacy-inspired hate crime. And 3, Roman numeral 3, was read, heard, or viewed by a person who engaged in the planning, development, preparation, or perpetration of a white supremacy-inspired hate crime. Folks, you can't make this up. And then the rest of it is carte blanche to the Department of Justice to go after them, and then with absolute reckless abandonment. There is no limit here. So what she is basically saying is, we will give you the power of the Patriot Act, unfettered power, to go after these people. This is crazy. Anyone in the matter preceding subparagraph A by inserting after race, color, religion, national origin of any person because of a white supremacy-based motivation against any person. So here we're singling out a single race, which is very dangerous in and of itself. It's a whole other element to this. This is blatantly unconstitutional. You're singling out one race as being a perpetrator. Tell me, folks, who perpetrated the rash of what was being called as hate crimes against Asians in the last 2 years? 3 years. According to FBI statistics, who largely perpetrated those violent, quote-unquote, hate crimes? Were they white supremacists? They were not. They were not. They were left-wingers. Many of them African American. I hate to bust everybody's bubble. Jonathan Turley, who's got a blog out there, in case you, it's jonathanturley.org. I'm not going to attempt this Latin phrase. The thing itself speaks. All right. He tweeted, and then I'm going to read some of his actual article. But before I do, he tweeted in the 2-tweet thread, basically giving out this article, announcing this article. He followed it up with a second tweet. He said, even in today's anti-free speech environment in Congress, a recent proposed by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee is a menacing standout. The bill is an almost impenetrable word salad of convoluted provisions. However, what is clear, perhaps the only thing clear, is that the, quote, Leading Against White Supremacy Act of 2023, unquote, would gut the First Amendment and create effective thought crimes. We're going to talk a little bit again about how I said last week, and I'm going to give you an example about how the major problem with the debates over these bills of rights, and last week we were talking about the Second Amendment, the major problem is that not just the population, but lawmakers themselves are wholly ignorant to our founding principles and wholly ignorant to things as basic as the difference between personhood and citizenship and subject, being a subject versus citizen, right? A right and duty. And we were talking about that in the context of the Second Amendment last week. Here is a great example of the First Amendment, which encompasses several things: religion and speech, press freedoms. In this case, it is very clear we have a major problem with this Congresswoman not understanding the First Amendment, or worse, she does, but simply is an authoritarian tyrant and doesn't give a damn about First Amendment and the principles behind it. So we have two possibilities. She knows, doesn't care. Is a horrible, horrible tyrant who would do anything, say do anything, use a race, use fear between races to get rid of the First Amendment altogether. Or ignorant. Someone who simply doesn't understand it whatsoever. And I'm going to pull some quotes here. But before we do, let's look at Turley's writing. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing. All right. But I do want to pull some quotes here because it's going to piggyback us into the next segment. Although we'll probably have to take a break before that next segment. It's going to piggyback us into it here. But for the love of God, I need a new one. This thing has just seen its better days. All right. No, I was right the first time. All right. So, writes, the House bill would basically criminalize free speech. All right. And by the way, this is worth reading the whole thing. House bill would criminalize social media postings supporting white supremacy or replacement theory. But in it, obviously, he doesn't look at that as their own, it's just social media, your right to a social media. He's talking about speech here. All right. Sam Adams, before I get into this, quoted from Wells, William V, The Life and Public Service of Sam Adams, Volume 1, page 22 to 23. If you're interested. The sum of all is, if we would most truly enjoy the gift of heaven, which is freedom he is referring to, let us become a virtuous people, then shall we both deserve and enjoy it. While on the other hand, if we are universally vicious and debauched in our manners, though the form of our Constitution carries the face of the most exalted freedom, we shall in reality be the most abject slaves. Speech, and it's just a debate over which amendment is more important than the other. The truth is, you can't have one without the other. You can't have any of the first without the second. But you can never obtain the second in codified law unless the people who designed this codified law, this social contract, truly understood the principles of the first. It's very much a catch-22, or, which came first, the chicken and the egg, but that's the beauty and the magic of the Bill of Rights and the fact it was adopted and ratified at all as part of the Constitution, as part of, us becoming a unified country. So let's just get down to it. The anti-free speech movement in the United States continues to grow with alarming speed among writers, journalists, academics, and most importantly, Democratic members of Congress. And he's right to say most importantly, because ultimately, if they have majorities, they can pass these laws. It almost doesn't matter what academics say and writers say. If the members of the legislative body itself know better. Unfortunately, this is becoming a cycle. The journalists are being pumped out by the academics. Writers are reacting to the journalists. And eventually, generation later, those people will want to run for office. And then they'll, in turn, react to the journalists who are produced by the academics and are all being propped up by the writers, being fueled is a better way to put it, by the writers into a frenzy of anti-free speech sentiment that'll result in tyranny. I mean, there's no other possible outcome here. Members now openly call for censorship and the manipulation of what citizens see and read. Yet, even in this environment, a recent proposed by, I really should have said proposal, but I know I said, by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee is a menacing standout again, like he wrote on Twitter. Jackson has introduced a bill that is an almost impenetrable word salad of convoluted provisions, and you know this again. The bill is not going to pass. Well, folks, for now, we can say the bill is not going to pass. Right, because why? Because it's a very small Republican majority. It's not going to pass. But in 2 years from now, if Democrats have control of both houses of Congress, can Jonathan Turley make the promise that the bill is not going to pass? We just discussed in the prior segment about the angles of the world going down. The Pelosi's of the world being replaced with radicals like Hakeem Jeffries. Cori Bush's replacing other Pelosi tenants. I think it's a little bit, and I don't think Jonathan Turley's doing this intentionally, but it is foolhardy and dangerous to simply dismiss it. The bill's not going to pass. Years and years and years, people dismissed Maxine Waters. She was openly denounced by leadership many times for comments she made. Yet, in 2018, when Democrats won control of the House of Representatives, they put her in charge of the banking committee, banking and finance. A radical loon who didn't even know that the federal government was solely in charge of student loans. Do we really have to play the clip again of her grilling CEOs of banks? No, we don't. However, the anti-free speech elements of the bill are deeply disturbing because they reflect successful efforts at speech criminalization in other countries. Right, I think it's time we start realizing that American exceptionalism doesn't really make us different than history. Or, no, let me put this another way. I fully believe in American exceptionalism, but it is not because of anything that I perceive in the future. It is by what we have accomplished in the past and the values that we enshrined in our social contract. That's what makes us exceptional. The tenets of the Protestant ethic that make us more productive and make us more charitable than any other society. That makes us exceptional. The fact that that social contract specifically and explicitly credits God, a creator, for providing us, endowing us with these rights, makes us exceptional because everybody else holds their hand out like a bunch of beggars to the government of men, and we do not, or we didn't. But it doesn't mean that that American exceptionalism does not exclude us from falling prey to the repeated mistakes of history. So while he's pointing out that this has happened in other countries, and I think this warning should be taken as a dire warning. Again, just 20 years ago, nobody would have ever have had the audacity to present a bill like this in Congress. It also reflects elements in a bill that I testified against last year in the Senate. And this is what, by the way, it's the nature of the left. This is what they do. You can defeat one thing, they'll be back. They will be back. Rest assured. In general, a person engages in white, and we went over this already, I don't have to read it again. Thus, anyone who is accused of white supremacy ideology, as opposed to other race-based ideologies, can be charged if such views have, quote, motivated others to plan or perpetrate criminal acts. It is a criminal hate speech law that would violate core principles of the First Amendment. It makes clear that the accused does not actually have to support or conspire in a crime. Even being accused of espousing replacement theory is enough to generate a federal charge. I told you, Tucker Carlson would be charged under this law. And Coulter would be charged. The former president would be charged. Yours truly could be charged with a federal crime. Even though what the context we're talking about it in is usually very data-driven. I mean, do we not go over numbers? Remember Loudoun County? Remember that episode about Virginia? And we did several other states? The difference between immigration in the 90s and the early 2000s versus now? According to this bill, that's a federal crime if this bill were to pass. The Great Replacement Theory was the focus of the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing last year, in which Democrats alleged that Republicans and Fox News, in particular, are, quote, radicalizing domestic terrorists with rhetoric opposing illegal immigration. I testified at that hearing. Members advocated legislation to force the FBI to focus on such theories as dangerous white supremacy threats. The Jackson bill would allow postings on social media to be the basis for criminal charges, and we already read that. The bizarrely written reasonable person standard is so opaque and cryptic that it is enthralling. How would a reasonable person discern a predisposition to engage in white supremacy? It's crazy, Jonathan. This is crazy. I would argue this is written to be like this. Again, to give the FBI, a dangerous organization, carte blanche to roll right over political opponents. It appears to follow Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart's test for pornography in his concurring opinion in Jacobellis v. Ohio, 1964. Quote, I shall not today attempt further to define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that shorthand description, and perhaps I could never succeed in intelligibly doing so, but I know it when I see it, and the motion picture involved in this case is not that. Pornography. Once again, this is so flagrantly unconstitutional on so many levels, from free speech to vagueness, that it is actually impressive. I don't find it impressive. I find it, first of all, terrifying. Second of all, offensive would be the IVE adjective I'm looking for here as the more appropriate one. Impressive? No. There's nothing impressive about it. She's not special. She's not new. She's now thrown her lot in with a long list of historical tyrants that have made similar, bold, I'll give her that, bold proposals. But it doesn't impress me. Being a tyrant doesn't impress me. It offends me. It concerns me. It is easy, however, to dismiss, except that such criminal penalties exist in other countries like England, where even a silent prayer is a criminal offense when done near an abortion clinic. Remember last week, I said I don't mean to insult any one of my European listeners, but that there is, in fact, a difference between a citizen and a subject. And because your version of democracy, which that's not what we have in the United States, your version of democracy is still nonetheless derived from the Hobbesian view of personhood, where our system of government, small r republicanism, which has been over the years, largely 16th, 17th Amendment or the worst offenders, been morphed into some kind of hybrid of a democratic republic. We are not derived from the Hobbesian version or the Hobbesian idea of personhood. We are derived from the Lockean idea of a citizen. It's different. So no offense, but that's un-American. A silent prayer would be unconstitutional in our government under multiple interpretations of the First Amendment. First of all, you have the right to pray whatever the hell you want in this country. This entire country was founded by people of faith who are running away from England and other European powers who sought to tell them exactly that, how to pray. It's a criminal offense when done near an abortion clinic in England. So not only do you not have the freedom of religion, you don't have the freedom of speech. You're not even free to oppose abortion. This is like Sinead O'Connor, like sick. Sinead O'Connor, radical, kind of sick. Last year, Nicholas Brock, 52, was convicted of a thought crime in Maidenhead, Berkshire. The neo-Nazi was given a 4-year sentence for what the court called his, quote, toxic ideology, unquote, based on the contents of the home he shared with his mother in Maidenhead, Berkshire. When most of us find Brock's views, while most of us find Brock's views repellent and hateful, they were confined to his head in his room. Yet, Judge Peter Lauder, QC, dismissed free speech or free thought concerns with a truly Orwellian statement. Quote, I do not sentence you for your political views, but the extremity of those views informs the assessment of dangerousness. Unquote. Holy crap. Orwell, that is the appropriate thinker to ascribe that statement to, or to attribute that statement. That's crazy. That is a dangerous level of relativism that could get your opponents locked away one day, which might even make you happy, but you locked away the very next. Lauder lambasted Brock for holding Nazi and other hateful views. It is clear that you're a right-wing extremist. Your enthusiasm for this repulsive and toxic ideology is demonstrated by the graphic and racist iconography which you have studied and appeared to share with others. And again, I will say this, and a little visit from my son there. All through the Great War, or no, the Second Great War, I should say, because people think about World War I. Being a Nazi wasn't illegal in the United States of America. There were fascist movements. You know what the difference is between today and then? One, there were actually real Nazis. Two, we still had faith in our own American ideals. And we still had faith that those ideals in a marketplace of ideas would win the day. Now, these people want to control that marketplace because they're after power. And those American ideals are actually dangerous to them. They wouldn't have been back then. Now, we've had our periods of McCarthyism, the Red Scare, right? Although Senator McCarthy was right about the State Department. He was right about Hollywood. He was. The only ones who didn't know that at the time were a lot of the American people, the Ozzie and Harriet kind of American family, who never would have considered their government to be that despotic or, aspiring to be that despotic. And they'd give thought to the concept they would ever kill a U.S. president. They would ever assassinate a U.S. president. Now, hopefully, we're going to ask this in the next poll. I won't be surprised if the majority of Americans believe that the CIA killed JFK. I can't wait to ask that question. Even though Lauder agreed that the defendant was older, had limited mobility, and, quote, there was no evidence of disseminating to others, unquote, he still sent him to prison for holding extremist views. It's crazy. It's crazy. And that term, toxic ideology, the court called it in their opinion, in his opinion. Don't you think Peter Lauder sounds like just about every Democratic politician? It's like every academic, every guest on MSNBC, every pre-Elon Musk verified Twitter journalist from supposed mainstream media. Toxic ideology, toxic masculinity, toxic this, toxic that. No, folks. That is not American. But it does stem again from this ignorance towards what is at the core of these beliefs. There's no such thing as illegal hate speech. The court has limited speech to, you can't yell fire in a theater. We all know that. But there's hate speech is the kind of speech you would expect the government to assign to political opponents. Unpopular speech, whether it's hateful or whatever, unpopular speech our founders viewed to be the most important to protect, because that, of course, is the sphere of dissent. Nobody cares about speech that doesn't offend others, offend the government, isn't controversial. There is no need for that speech to be protected. It's just inherently like that. It's just inherently the case. The need is to protect speech that people deem to be offensive and unworthy of civil discourse. Last week we talked about this, and I'm going to get on with this here. We're going to wrap this up here. But last week we talked about this in the context of the Second Amendment. We read some Jefferson that I quoted in our Virtuous Republic. No citizen has a right in which they are not assigned an equal, if not greater, duty. You want the right to free speech? You better understand what that means. All of the specifics mentioned in the First Amendment, press, religion, you better understand. You have a duty to understand why we recognize these rights. And by the way, that they're given by God. That's your duty. And you cannot expect, there can be no expectation that you will continue to enjoy these rights if you abstain or if you object or out of laziness or whatever it is from fulfilling those duties. What you can expect is the nature of government is such that it will exploit that and it will take them from you, even though they have no right to them. Last week, we talked about the Second Amendment. Now it applies to the First Amendment. It never ends. But thank you, Geraldo Rivera, for proving our case. From last week, when we said the primary problem with the debate over gun issues and in general, period, Second Amendment issues, is that big mouths like Geraldo Rivera and others who have these outsized voices and impacts on the debate don't know what the hell they're talking about. He's a total ignoramus tool. He doesn't know the gun culture. He doesn't understand firearms. He knows nothing of the Second Amendment. He doesn't understand the core behind it. And I said last week, and I tell you, I'll say it again. I know many Northerners from anti-gun states who moved to the South, very much like me, who turned into gun rights enthusiasts. Responsible. People who understand the point of the Second Amendment, which is not to hunt white-tailed deer. I know nobody who was a part of that community who moved to like a gun-hating state like New York and New Jersey and got converted into like a liberal gun hater. I know nobody like that. Now, I'm sure they exist. I'm a man of statistics. I know how it works. They're out there somewhere. But they pale in comparison to the converts. There are few people living on Scranton Avenue in Staten Island, where I used to live. There are very few Southerners living on Scranton Avenue, living in my old neighborhood in Jersey, who moved to New York and New Jersey because they want to give up their guns and their rights and pay more in taxes and be less safe. But there are a whole hell of a lot of people from the 5 boroughs that I know here now, that I know in Florida by my house in Florida, or my old house in Florida, even in liberal Gainesville, filled with them. Let's listen to this idiot.
If that's a word, it makes macho the people who possess it. Oh, look at me, I'm a big deal.
It's a rifle.
And it's not a rifle.
Yes, it's
Greg.
a rifle.
It is a machine.
What does AR stand for?
It is an automatic rifle.
No, that's not what it is.
Well, all I know is that AR-15s have no place in American society other than sport clubs. And I agree with him on that. I also think, ironically, that we do need more IRS agents if they say we need more.
Who cares what you think? You're an idiot. You just demonstrated to everybody that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Geraldo loved automatic rifles when he thought he was going to open Al Capone's safe and find a bunch of Thompson submachine guns that were legal, by the way. Idiot. How could you not be ashamed of yourself? What happened to, if you don't have anything intelligent to say or nice to say, there are different adages, don't say it all. Don't open your mouth when you're stupid and you're ignorant to a topic. Ignorant is when you're capable of learning, you just haven't learned, and you're just in the dark. Stupid is when you have been exposed to it, but you're too stupid. Geraldo's been around the block for a long time, folks. He's lived from everywhere to New York, New Jersey to Ohio. He's covered news all over the globe, all over the country, all over the globe. We remember we had to kick him out of Afghanistan. So he spent time embedded with combat units and doesn't know that AR stands for armor light? Assault rifle is a fictitious name, basically, that they just created as part of the gun control culture. Automatic rifle. No. The Thompson submachine guns you thought you were going to find in Al Capone's safe in the lowest point of your career, Geraldo, which was probably a scam, a scheme, was probably a total setup. You probably fabricated that whole thing. The Thompson submachine guns, those were automatic. This is a problem. It's a real problem. How could you be reasonable with people or have an intellectual debate with people who simply don't know what they're talking about? You can't. It's all emotional. It's all okay, well, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. All I do know is that they have no place in society. So you just admit you don't know what the hell they are. You misclassified them, yet you're still offering your opinion on whether or not they have a place in society? Men used to be embarrassed when they spoke in from such a position of ignorance or stupidity. And on Geraldo's case, we got to stop using the word ignorant. A lot of other people are ignorant. And I think it does them a disservice to put him in the same category with them. He's stupid. That's stupidity. He had his chance. Or maybe, no, he had his chance. I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He jumps from that to shilling to IRS agents. That tells you everything you need to know. He stabbed his own friends in the back, Trump being one of them, just to try to salvage something of a political career. Sad. But we can't expect even a codified, a social contract that is codified like our Constitution is. We can't expect it to hold up, as Adams says, as Jefferson says, as Franklin says. I mean, we've read these quotes over and over again. You can't expect that to be the case if you have this much stupidity and ignorance with the body politic, within the body politic, especially within the cartel, the information cartel. That's why people that you would think to limit the scope of government as much as possible, like Thomas Jefferson, still widely favored and very passionate over public education. Not federal, but public education. Because it wasn't federal. They hate to blow all your minds. But Massachusetts, their public education was dealt with the church until like the mid-19th century. But they knew that people citizens needed an understanding of these things in order to keep the social contract alive. You forget a clause in it, and you're screwed. And that's what's going on here. It's really quite simple. Is it easy to fix? No. It took them decades to change the meaning of these words, to change the meaning of these values, to make people hate values that protect them. That took decades. It's going to take a long time to undo. Anyway, links in the description as always, to the Public Polling Project. If it's not the right one up there, then like I said, don't worry, it'll be advanced forward. Let's see how many Americans think that about the former president, JFK. And we didn't have time to go over. We'll leave it till Friday, which is probably better anyway, because it's more of a discussion day. We'll leave the ideas for new culture war questions up for discussion on Free Willing Friday. Okay, I think that's probably best anyway. Thanks again to our sponsors, New One, Field of Greens. Don't forget to go to fieldofgreens.com. Use the promo code TPP at checkout. All right, and that will get you started on 15% off of your order. And of course, on For Patriots, you can use TPP to get 10% off your site-wide order. But the link for the best deal they got going is the People's Pundit 3-month survival kit. That's For Patriots, the number 4, patriots.com/TPP. And if you do browse their other products, which are all great, fantastic, it's TPP 10, and that'll give you 10% off site-wide. Contact the folks at GOLDCO as well, tpplikesgold.com, tpplikesgold.com. When you fill out that form, beat them to the punch. This way, when you place your order for precious metals, coins, whatever you want to do, you can get that free coin, plus you will get a surplus, depending on what you spend, all right? Like I said, our offer was roughly, I think it was 6% on the dot, actually. But you can get more than that, depending on what you do. So thanks to the sponsors. Thanks to all of you for watching and supporting them. And we will be back Friday. I got to ask the question, which I have to address right now really quick. Is 12:30 the new time? I hope not. It's been that way. The way the schedule has been working, we've really had no choice. But no, I'd like to reclaim my 12 o'clock hour. And I hope to do that again really soon, if not Friday. All right. I like my 12 o'clock noon hour, noon to 2. And this time we started at 12:30. So we went to 2:30. All right. So again, thanks to everybody. Share far and wide. And we'll hopefully get the Public Polling Project going really, really soon. Thank you, guys. You all have a great day as well. And we'll see you on Friday, Free Will on Friday. Locals, discussion over the questions. Today. Oh, national voter file analysis coming for local supporters.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time to query this database and do inference modeling nationally, because there are multiple states where party registration is not available, or registration by party is not available. So it does take time, but we're doing it now. We usually do a year-end one, but I wanted to give a little bit of time for the election attributes that update after an election. I wanted to give it a little bit of time to do that. And now I think we're there. So we're running that. Should be out this weekend, all right? Or before, if not Friday, before the weekend. But that'll be for local supporters. I mean, if not before the weekend on Friday, the weekend. But that'll be available for local supporters. And we saw Gallup actually had the highest number for Republicans. We're going to see if registration followed. That's party affiliation, which is fluid. Registration is more static, although the numbers do look better for Republicans as time goes on. Why? What's happening? If that's the case, why aren't they routing them? Well, We've talked about vote by mail, but it also is that something has gone on with independents. I think Republicans cannibalized a lot of them under Trump, and that has continued. They cannibalized a lot of older Democrats and working class white Democrats that just simply became Trumplicans. And what remains for independents is more liberal. But we'll know that for sure when we run this model, all right? Or at least we'll have more insight in it. So don't miss it. Hopefully it'll be topic of discussion on Friday as well. But if not, the topic is definitely the questionnaire and the new culture wars. All right, folks, thanks again. See you soon. All the best.
Yes.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but you don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a single dad.